Good morning, viewers. Welcome to Frankly Speaking with Vibhuti Jha. Today we are going to talk about, once again, Kashmir, Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh, the region that is now free from the shackles of Article 370 and 35A. Now, why that is important is that that particular region, Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh, which we involuntarily call as Kashmir. Think about it. It is only 14% of that land. But in a remarkable daily usage, Kashmir symbolized the whole state, including 50% of Ladakh, which was part of Kashmir. As if that was not enough, every single treatment from India was going towards appeasing a very limited number of people who made up of 14% of the landmass of JKL. Now, India has recently celebrated its 73rd Independence Day. Congratulations to all Indians. We are part of that process in India, in the United States, everywhere. People were celebrating with very renewed vigor. There was a different beat to the drums that were beating on the streets of New York and elsewhere. Now, there is another very important dynamics of Kashmir issue, and that is the impact and implication of this decision on India, Indians, and the assertiveness of the Indian mindset. That is very important. I believe that since United Nations chose to discuss this matter in a closed-door session at the prompting of China, it was rather remarkable that this issue, which is an internal matter of India, was taken to United Nations, whereas many other issues of this kind must be taken in the similar vein. Now, to discuss this entire gamut of impact implications of this entire process, we came to know that 7 primary leading institutions of Pune in Maharashtra, they have offered to open their campuses in Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh region. That's a truly remarkable part. Education, Kashmir was, that entire region was a seat of Hindu belief, Saraswati ka ghar tha wo. Now, it is great that these institutions will be coming back to their homeland. Now, to discuss this very tricky issue, I decided to invite 2 non-resident Indian young men who are high-class professionals, and they are very educated. They are not related to the politics and economics of it, but they are very aware. And I have great pleasure in welcoming Mr. Abhishek Sinha. He is an IIT graduate. He has worked with American corporates for a long number of years, and now he is starting his oown hedge fund. So Abhishek ji, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And we were anxiously looking forward to your input, which could be technical or non-technical as the case may be. In the other guest I have is a very well known to me. He's part of my life. He's my son, Aditya Jha. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for agreeing to come here. And I have a very particular interest in inviting him for the program. He is a master, he has attained his master's degree from Columbia University in negotiations and conflict resolution. And I wanted to ask and come to you with a thought process that what is left to negotiate? Is the negotiation scenario so hard that the famous Indian Foreign Service is also struggling with that? So what would be the negotiating tool that India can potentially use, which is looking at it from outside from the sidelines, that people are not able to see because they are too close? Some of the thoughts that can come from you, and you come from the private equity background, so you have investments as well as negotiating for money as part of your venture. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having me.
I will open the innings with Abhishek. You is to give us a flavor of what is the impact of removal of 370 and 35A on the minds of people, the psyche of Kashmir and Jammu, Ladakh, and the international repercussions that we are seeing, in which, in my opinion, I'll preface it by saying that the international community has behaved remarkably well insofar as India is concerned, whether it is Modi's diplomatic initiatives or recognizing the fact that this is indeed an internal matter of India, and every country in the world has their own set of internal problems. Can an internal problem be magnified as a global problem?
I just want to start with what Mr. Ambedkar said to Mr. Abdullah when he went there on after consultation with Mr. Nehru to put a 370 article in our constitution. Mr. Ambedkar categorically said, Mr. Abdullah, you want that India should defend Kashmir, India should develop Kashmir, and Kashmiris should have equal rights as the citizens of India. But you don't want India and any citizen of India to have any rights in Kashmir. I am the law minister of India. I cannot betray the interest of my country. He said no. Now what happened? As we have known, that this country, India, had a transfer of power on 15th August 1947. It didn't get independence. It had a committee which got a transfer of power. These people were in there. He says no, that I do not agree to this, because in an art of negotiation, we'll come to Aditya with that one, that you are taking everything, you are leaving me with nothing. Why should I do that? If there are three parties, I'm trying to kind of just put the basic construct together. Kashmiris, state of India, state of Pakistan. Kashmiris or any buffer state would always love to play the one guy versus the next guy and take as much concessions as possible. I don't have the army and I'm a landlocked country. I cannot survive by myself. I produce nothing. I have no machinery. I have to go to either A or B. I will go to B and say that I would have chosen A and give me more otherwise. That's what started to happen. In Article 370, you give them the power of having their own constitution. By Article 335A, you said you can even decide who is your citizen. And you can even decide your own law. You can decide whatever you want. And what has happened over a period of time, I would like to kind of mention a few things, that I can give you something which you can do, even like you don't give my basic human rights to somebody, or right to education, or right to information, or all that is not implemented in your territory. You cannot go against Indian Penal Code. The Valmiki Samaj, which came to them in 1957, the 200 families, they were given citizenship of Jammu and Kashmir on one clause, that even their sons and daughters will become a cleaner, even after taking an MBBS education. Otherwise, they don't have the
So the question then arises, which is what I will just interject here, because we are having a conversation.
Yes,
so
yes, yes.
It's not a debate, or it's
not. No, not a debate. I want to cover
yeah, so I will cover that. How is it that in the Indian mindset operated at that time that they gave everything away? I mean, what was it about the Indian mindset that we decided to give? Adi, you want to say anything on that?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a question of weighing what you lose and what you gain. And to Abhishek's point, or from his perspective, what he was highlighting is the fact that India approached Kashmir always from a position to appease not only the Kashmiris but everybody else as well. The change in that strategy now has been very effective, in my opinion, from the perspective of mindsets, as you mentioned earlier, as well as from a negotiation and conflict resolution perspective. Because at the end of the day, there are 5 basic kinds of orientations when it comes to sort of conflict resolution or negotiation, right? You can avoid the conflict, or you can compete and fight for every drop. You can collaborate, you can compromise, or you can accommodate. India has always chosen to accommodate because the fear has always been that we would lose something, or whether it's Kashmir, the voting power of the Muslim minority in India, etc. And as a result, the policy of appeasement was better. It was better to have something, a little bit of something, than 100% of nothing. That in turn leads to a position of weakness when your opponent is coming from a competitive orientation. In that situation, you're constantly moving to give, as opposed to actually looking at what is in fact in your best interest, not only now, but in the long term. And that intrinsically has been, in my opinion, the biggest change with what has happened in the last 2 weeks. It has filled every Indian with pride. It has definitely done with me, that at least we can say the country today is now whole. And we hold our head up with that much more pride. And going forward, saying that no more will we turn to others to appease them, but rather look at ourselves and say, what is best in our interests?
And that's a great point. And Abhishek, that Amit Shah ji made a statement that with Modi's leadership, the era of appeasement is over. Now that's very critical, because Mr. Modi did not go for this tough Kashmir decision prior to election. Had he done that prior to election, you could have said it was an election gimmick. He went to the country that should we win, we will take care of this element. And the country overwhelmingly voted for him, giving him more seats than he had in 2014. And he right bang on after the elections, he has kind of completely transformed the narrative, the new assertive Indian, which is what Adit was saying just now, is that I'm not going to appease because it's not worked. So what has not worked for 70 years, what's the guarantee? What am I sitting here to talk? And in that reference, I will also want you to think about it. When the United Nations sat for the closed door meeting, India's permanent representative, Mr. Akbaruddin, he was asked by a Pakistani correspondent, when will you have a talk with Pakistan? And he not only said that stop terror, let's talk, he also went ahead, shook hands with the Pakistani journalist and showed a candor, showed a courage, a charisma. That is the picture of new India.
Thank you, sir. Since we are talking a lot of points at the same time, so I want to touch a couple of points
Sure.
here. First of all, I'll go to Adi's point of negotiation. So at the time when Pakistan was imagined in our minds in Lahore Declaration, Muslim League wanted a Pakistan. Congress and our leaders representing India, so-called, were adamant that there will be nothing like this till there were riots and massacres. And we gave in. We caved in. And then people understood that negotiating with India is easy. All you need to do is to be inflexible and inflict a couple of wounds, and that will happen. Now coming to Kashmir, the ruler at that time was trying to play a game as well. As I said, the buffer states will love to play that game. And they were playing that. Third point, Hyderabad, Operation Polo. In Operation Polo, you take Hyderabad away from Nizam of Hyderabad, you sign the same accession deal which was signed by the ruler of Kashmir. Why Kashmir gets so many 370 and 35A and the Nizam of Hyderabad gets nothing? All the 562 who signed the instrument accession can say that everyone is equal. You cannot pick and choose. Because Nehru was from there, or he has a friend who was negotiating, or some way or other, for 35A. For 35A, which was inserted in your constitution by a presidential order, then President Dr. Rajendra Prasad wrote a letter to Nehru saying, do you think this is constitutional? And Nehru comes back and says that, okay, we will talk it later. Okay, let's go back to our situation right now. Solving this one has taken 4 years. So Amit Shah Law Minister and Mr. Modi were working on it. If you remember last November, they got something passed with 367 saying that the LOC people need a kind of reservation. For that, you need to give governor the powers of legislative assembly, and constituent assembly should be read as legislative assembly. So that change has repercussions. They went to Supreme Court and got that straightened. So what happened, that Modi government was working on it with legal ramifications and everything else over a period of time. They were not just kind of showing all the cards. Third, after changing this one, India has given such a big signal to all the 5 permanent members that I'm not going to take any interference by the world. Either you can play ball with me, or you can choose not to play ball. At the day of UN Security Council closed door meeting, our defense minister says that the no first use of nuclear weapons can be looked at.
That's
That-
a very good point, and that's what I was referring to, that the new assertive India is coming up. Adi, we will talk about a couple of other issues, and I want you to take off on that right after this short break. Welcome back. Reverting to the same conversation about Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, one of the key issues here is the action taken by the leadership of Prime Minister Modi and Amit Shah. It was a wonderful pointer that political leadership can take actions if leadership commits itself with a good mind, right approach and a good timing to accomplish something. This is an unheard of kind of a event that has happened in the life of Indians. Adi, would you like to talk about this timing part of it? It was 70 years. Why now? What happened that led to this momentous step being taken?
Sure. I think, again, Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. For after spending 70 years of the same strategy and taking the same steps, to change your orientation made sense. Second, the other thing to remember is that in order to create peace, lasting peace in any region, the conflict has to be ripe for it. What that means, what ripeness means, is that in addition to having all of the factors, whether it's economic, political, and geopolitical, if you will, the nation, the status quo needs to affect all parties involved in it adversely. It should be a hurting stalemate, in other words. In this particular case, the stakeholders involved, Kashmir, India, Pakistan, two of those stakeholders, the current status quo was continually hurting, Kashmir and India. For Pakistan, the stalemate doesn't affect it. It doesn't change its outlook on its future. By doing what the government has now done, by internalizing the whole discussion, it is now you can create peace because the two stakeholders in that discussion, Kashmiris and Indians, can find a sustainable solution in the long run because now they both want change.
Your thoughts on this same particular aspect, but with a twist to it.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
like, just for the sake of argument,
Yeah.
look at it from Pakistan point of view. Pakistan has got a question of identity and existence. So I, as a Pakistani army, I need my enemy, or I need an apple of discord, or I need my jugular vein to be alive, and I have to keep talking about it. So unilateral 370 abrogation, I have to say that I have a say in it, such that people are interested in my theater. After 1988, when Afghanistan infiltration by Russia was over, you put a lot of insurgents in Kashmir. And this whole insurgency and violence started, and it reached a limit in 19th January 1990. Not a single person was convicted, or not a single case was filed against the mass exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. So if you look at it, Kashmir is a vital point for Pakistani army. That's the reason this narrative, this international warfare, if you look at the things which are available to Kashmiri army, Pakistani army, they cannot attack you, they cannot do anything. In the joint parliamentary sitting, Imran Khan said that we have no other option. So we can go to UN Security Council for an informal meet, or internationalize this, or have a Twitter war or a false narrative war. So those are the things in fifth generation warfare we are facing on Twitter, on fake news, on this whole idea creation that India is the oppressor.
And that's a wonderful point you brought in about the Twitter war and social media war, because that's exactly what the Pakistani Prime Minister's belligerence went out to. I mean, he looked like anxiously as if the guy whose whole power structure has been taken away from his hand. when the Pakistani Prime Minister melts down in the manner that he did, that he virtually declared war against India, that we have to go to war, whether it's Twitter or social media or anything in that sense, where is the space for negotiation? What exactly do you negotiate with somebody who is as belligerent, who says, I want to kill you, or nothing else?
So you can't negotiate ideology, right? When you look at it from the perspective, as you're saying, when someone is trying to attack you, it is impossible to negotiate a settlement because they are coming from a state of absolute belligerence. For Pakistan, this particular issue is sensitive because of the fact that it goes back to the idea of the creation of the country itself, right? When you're thinking about it, Pakistan was created with this idea that false or not, Muslims needed a country of their own because they would be persecuted and abused in India. That's the narrative that they continue to push, because if they stop it, the argument could be that the essence of their creation is unnecessary.
If the essence of their creation is unnecessary, this is a very important statement. The reason why I say that is that currently Farooq Abdullah, there should be investigation on his role in the 1990 when he gave up the chief ministership, or he was the chief minister, and then the Kashmiri exodus happened of the Hindus from there. Nobody has talked about it. And if the terrorism is because of suffering, I wonder why none of the Kashmiris became terrorists to attack that region. But that being said, the belligerence being said, the entire narrative, how did Pakistan get a permission to become the de facto protector of Kashmir region? How did they become? That's a question that bothers me. Was it that we gave away a lot, or we were just stupid enough to appease? What happened in that?
From 1947 or 1940s theater, if you think about it, we gave away a lot, and then Jinnah was a stronger personality than Nehru, and Patel was the most strongest. But Gandhi comes in and he subdues Patel. That's the reason Hyderabad is such a success and Kashmir is such a mess, right? Now what happens? Fast forward. Why does Pakistan need Kashmir? Because they have Pashtuns uprising, they have Sindh issue, they have Balochistan issue. There are so many different theaters open in Pakistan that you need a unifying force, an agenda, some kind of theater where people can look at and say something good is going on. Second, you have seen that the puppet government completely toes the line from the army, right? An army needs its significance and the high GDP to whatever funding ratio they have, and the kind of control they have over all the Pakistani machinery and economy, right? And they get a raise every time and everything else. Let's not go into that. So what happens that they need to have this ongoing issue as on the burner, right? Last year, Gilgit and Baltistan was internalized by Pakistan. They think they can do it unilaterally. But all the discussion, just look at the framing, all the discussion is about, from Pakistan's perspective, India occupied Kashmir. India is just turning the table. India, yesterday Rajnath Singh said that yes, if you want a bilateral discussion, I'm ready. But all the discussion will take place on Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And they are not happy with it. Think about this from a negotiator's perspective, that equality is my loss. So if you say that everyone is justice for all, appeasement for none, I feel that I have lost something.
You are absolutely right about that. And that's another thing which always bothers me, is that how come in the narrative of the international discussion, it's always about India occupied Kashmir, but nobody ever talks about POK as if it is a settled matter. And that's what bothers me. Even the narrative, the media, you seldom hear a story that 1,000 people protested in POK for freedom and they wanted India. None of this comes out in the Indian media either. So the point which I'm trying to say is that what are the likely implications of this? Because one thing is very clear. If Kashmiri Muslims, and I'm going to make a distinction here now, if Kashmiri Muslims feel that they are unsafe in India and they want to be a part of a separate arrangement, but India is home to 120 million Muslims. How are they prospering? Why aren't these people part of the process? And that's what is important for this particular step to happen, because now what has happened is that you cannot question the equality part. Prime Minister did something very important. The police force in Kashmir, in that region, JNKL as I call it, in that region now will have the same benefits that the policemen elsewhere have in India, if in case they meet with a disaster in the exercise of duty. So, Adi, coming back, your thoughts on this element, the legitimacy of Pakistan in this matter. Is this entire thing a hogwash that they now know कि अब हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते इसके बारे में?
So that's exactly the idea, right? I mean, by making this an internal matter and by having the UN ratify that this is not going to be an international discussion, but rather something that needs to be handled locally, you're now creating an opportunity to have a discussion for a more prolonged process. And arguably, the biggest result of Article 370 and the restrictions that it provides in terms of economic development and private sector investment in that state, that region particularly, all it has served is to keep Kashmir far behind the rest of India in its economic growth and prosperity. In order for peace to exist, economic welfare and growth and opportunity is critical. And by doing what has, and with the events of the last 2 weeks taking place, as you just mentioned earlier in the show, the 9 universities from Pune going to create campuses there, and other economic investment going into that state will create a much more fertile environment for the youth of that region, and Kashmir will candidly be able to catch up with the rest of India. That's when you will actually see, in stark contrast, POK and the Kashmir that is prospering within India itself. That's when you can actually go back and say, this is exactly, the proof is in the pudding, that when we actually are able to give that region stability, peace, through an internal restructuring and control, and drive economic prosperity, not just to the ruling class, but to every individual on the streets, every college graduate, that's when you'll start seeing a real change. It takes time.
It will take time. Nothing happens overnight, but the abrogation of 370 did happen overnight after a very sustained preparation for that. So things don't happen overnight. But we will stop here, but you have 1 minute to make a statement on one specific aspect, and that we can carry forward in our next segment, is that how is it that we Indians end up owning up the moral responsibility for everything good, whereas we are unable to force others to do that? This thought, hold it with yourself. We'll revert right after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We ended the last segment by requesting Abhishek to talk about why does the world sermonize India, as if we are the only country who hold the moral compass of every decision that we take. So whether it's anything in the country, and we are all aware of that, I'm not going to touch upon those things. But Abhishek, do tell me about your thoughts. Is that how come United Nations Security Council even chose to discuss this matter closed door, considering that China is talking about human rights in Jammu Kashmir, Ladakh, that's how I will call that region, but no mention about Hong Kong or Tibet. Pakistan talks about India has annexed the entire country, whereas they were the ones who are the actual aggressors. This history, somewhere along the line, the Indian narrative has shifted now. The Indian narrative was, dekh lenge, ho jayega. But that narrative, in a modern terminology, cannot hold water or candle, to put it that way. The point which I'm trying to make is that what must happen now that this particular thing has turned in India's favor? How do we take advantage of that? Or are we going to let it slip away?
Thank you, sir. This is the most interesting question. I want to kind of put it in a historical fashion.
Do that.
Let's go back to 1992, when Narasimha Rao is there and we don't have any foreign reserves. And then Manmohan Singh says that we need an economy which is globalized and we need to open it up and we need to do this and that, all those changes. What happens? You see somebody called Sachin Tendulkar coming up. So what happens? We start saying that, hey, I don't need to lose to Pakistan anymore. All of a sudden, you will see that Indian economy, Indian confidence that I don't need to be afraid to Pakistan, that started happening. You started growing a backbone. You started seeing that Swami Prasad Mukherjee's fight or the group of people started getting more momentum, right? Now what happens over a period of time, you would see that whenever your economy is strong and your resolve is strong, even if somebody is putting a false narrative on you, you can say no. Your kindness should not be taken as weakness. That was happening with India for a long period of time. Indian rate of growth was called Hindu rate of growth of 1%, right? That India can never rise. So you shook away all those shackles one by one by one. You started a brilliant space program, economy on rise, sports on rise, everything else on rise. Now, come 21st century, what has happened? There are no poles in this world. From Cold War to unipolar world to no poles at all. These 5 people of United Nations Security Council, they don't really represent the entire populace of the world. 1.3 billion people, 1/6 of the world has no representation. Their 5th economy by and purchase power parity, they are even higher. So what has happened? That United Nations doesn't have some kind of power on India what it used to have previously. In this closed door consultation where China is ready to throw their weight behind Pakistan all the time and say that all these terrorists are not terrorists and veto again and again and again. Mm-hmm. So what has happened? From 4:1, where Russia was the only helper of India in 1947, we have reached a level where 3.5 votes are strongly in India's favor.
Right.
The half vote is UK, and you have to understand the UK is completely infiltrated by Pakistanis. Right. And what happened on 15th of August that they tried to break into.
Only in UK that you
London.
had such a London disturbance.
One more thing, which is very disturbing. Yeah. The 2 things I want to mention. First, I will mention the London one. That London governor is a native of Pakistan.
You
Pakistan
mayor or
mayor. Sorry, mayor. Is a Pakistan descent, and they will start saying that liberals have to be there. We are victims. This and that. Okay, check that narrative. Second, Washington Post. Go to any Western media. You will see there is a nexus of people who are the same people who write against Modi and they have their own propaganda. They are look at Indian National Congress tweets and Imran Khan tweets. Imran Khan never says anything against Rahul Gandhi anymore. Right. He just says that BJP.
I mean, that was disgusting that the Prime Minister of a country would take on RSS for whatever the point. And it almost looked like it was Congress party agenda that he was.
What they are behaving right now, they are behaving as if we are undivided India and Pakistan is an internal part of India. They have no say.
No say in the matter. Abhishek, that's a great point that you said. And this brings in, you use the word Hindu.
Yeah.
And the point here arises is that, are we seeing, Adit, there is a rise on Hindu assertiveness. Now, becoming assertive, nothing wrong in it. Exposing somebody's wrongdoing, good for everybody. Keeping that perspective in mind, do you believe that the assertiveness that Mr. Modi has shown to the world around, that India will no longer be taken for granted? And that's a powerful thing to happen. How do you contend with the challenge of religious fanaticism that exists in our part of the world back home? How does one deal with that? Because there is a victim mentality that I see in most of the people. I've had a open conversation with my Muslim friends, and they say we are victims, we have sufferers. The question is, we have had Air Chief Marshal Latif, we have had Havaldar Abdul Hamid, Paramveer Chakra winner, we have had Aslam Sher Khan, who scored the winning goal against Pakistan in Malaysia Kuala Lumpur tournament. We have had many governors, 3 presidents of India who have been there. Bollywood is full of Muslim actors and actresses. Those who wanted to prosper, they did. Then there are people who just want to complain. Have they been made as a bogey, or there is a genuine complaint? So how do you deal with the religiosity of the challenge?
So it goes back to, again, marginalizing it to the point where it doesn't resonate with the masses, right? And this past election was a referendum on just that. When Muslims did come out in India and support the current regime, that is your actual proof that things are changing. And I would say it's not just a Hindu assertiveness that's coming up. It's an Indian assertiveness. It's a coalition of everyone in India saying we are no longer going to be, we are no longer going to look to the West or to anybody else to justify who we are. We control our narrative, we tell our story, and we control our destiny. That is how you change that victim mindset, by actually empowering everyone in India to say, you can change the stars, you can change your destiny, and you can control it. And that's the difference that you're seeing taking place across the board. To go back to your point when you were asking about how has the narrative changed, that's how we take it back. It is not by arguing or trying to negotiate with Pakistan. It is by actually telling your story and correcting the record wherever possible. That's where shows like this are important, and for Abhishek and I, it's important as non-resident Indians here to educate those who don't know yet. We can't blame those people who have no real relationship or no real connection to our part of the world. It is our job to actually start changing that narrative, because historically Pakistan has been the ally of the United States. That is changing as well. So geopolitically, as we are growing and becoming more of a player, it's up to us now to say, hey, what you were told is incorrect. This is the actual reality, and here's the information and the data that proves it.
And to that point, which is a brilliant point, technology is helping a lot.
Absolutely.
I call it the assertiveness, the Indian assertiveness is coming because everybody feels that way. I have known in one of the conclaves in India, there was a Muslim guy who got up and told General Musharraf, leave us Muslims alone with India. We are very happy here. We are fully satisfied. You have no business to interfere in our affairs. That's the kind of thing which I feel very nice when you say the Indian narrative is becoming stronger. And it's not only the Hindu narrative, but the Indian narrative is changing. So to that end, Abhishek, one thing which I want to ask you is that, is technology, in what way can we take advantage of technology to bombard the narrative that Adit referred to, the record? I call it the narrative. The Indian narrative has to change. I mean, in the history books of India, I have studied history in India, and you always read things which are, belittles others, non-Muslim leadership of India. I'm not going to go into bickering of that part, but I'm saying that what must India do now to change the narrative? Especially economy is important. Today, what was happening today is, now the world knows, and you alluded to that, Adit, that it is India's economic might, the market, the opportunity that it offers as an engine of growth to the world economy, that is making people stand up. So Saudi Aramco ties up with Reliance. Saudi government commits to invest $100 billion. United States is seeing India as a big market. Everybody is looking at India, given the disappointment with China now, or the market saturation in China. Your thoughts on that?
I would go with something which is so indigenous to Kashmir. Kashmir has its almanac for 5,094 years, and Shaivism was there. So just like Lord Shiva, you need to have animal magnetism, which is have confidence in yourself. Be your religion, be Hindu, Muslim, anything. Have any kind of religious thinking, but be proud that you're Indian. And then what happens? You would see that your confidence, even just the government kind of behaving a little bit more positively, giving justice to Muslim women with the triple talaq bill, right? You would see that Indians have started feeling very good outside. Second, what kind of electronic media use do you want to do? you cannot create a lot of clutter. You cannot become TV channels like Republic or somewhere where you need to shout at the top of your voice. Even a whisper breaks silence. That's Indian. You need to place your idea slowly, firmly. Now, look at what is going on. Every news channel in Western media, from Bloomberg to Washington Post to everyone else, only asks 2 people from India or 3 people from India, and they will keep writing the same article again and again and again. Right now, like 2 days ago, somebody writes that Indian democracy needs to be taken a notch down. Its credentials needs to be downgraded. That's a Washington Post news article. Because Nehruvian India and Gandhian India was something else. One has to understand that Congress was made by Britishers as a grievance redressal mechanism, that the grievance doesn't get out of control and we lead India. So they kept pushing out Subhash Chandra Bose, they kept pushing out everyone who was like a little bit more volatile, right? So 21st October 1943, 12 countries says that India is independent. Nobody kind of recognizes that till Modi comes in there and goes to Red Fort and does your unfurls your flag again on 21st October and 75 anniversary of that, right? And kind of remembers Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose as not a war criminal anymore. So those things, that Indian identity, you can be anybody. Just look at Indian National Army. Even when Pakistan and Muslim League were asking for states based on religion, Indian National Army had everyone in there.
That's right. And as it always happens, every good discussion must come to an end, either by mutual agreement or compulsion of time. So we have a compulsion of time. We have run out of the time now. But there is something very important here, is that this is the beginning of a dialogue. This is not ending today. We will continue to have the dialogue. And I'm very grateful to my 2 young presenters today. Thank you very much for coming, Aditya. You made me proud again.
Thank you,
and
sir.
Abhishek, it's such a delight to have you here. There were a couple of other issues that I wanted to talk about, but no, time is out. One thing which I always say as a food for thought, every single problem area in the world today, whether it's India, Kashmir, India, China, Palestinian, Israelis, it is a legacy of the British imperialism or European imperialism. That's truly remarkable. British didn't own us, but they divided us as they wished. Think about it. We will talk about this in subsequent programs. As somebody said very nicely, and I'm reading that, लम्हों ने खता की सदियों को सहना पड़ा. लम्हों ने खता की सदियों ने सही. Now that must end. The narrative must end. Thank you for being with us. Have a great weekend. Talk to you next week again.